Did you know that the average employee in America is not unionized? Let alone most big organizations treat their employees like shit. Hyundai is a good example. Amazon is a good example. A lot of companies are a good example, but let's take a deep dive in what's going on with the Hyundai workers in America and why they live in fear. Let's roll it.
Ecuador and Venezuela.
If they turn me into a robot, I don't have feelings, I don't have family. Everything I do now is for Hyundai first.
They treated you like a piece of meat.
Wow, sounds like Hollywood. I'm pretty sure they're partners in this shit.
All they wanted, when the new parts come in, get them on the lines, get them put together, and get them out on that truck.
Not now, but right now.
They don't care if you were sick, dying, it didn't matter.
I got hit in the face, and then about 2 weeks after I started, the forklift had raised an uneven load and just came crashing down.
We are learning more about that deadly accident.
Bryan County Sheriff's Office identified the man they say died at the Hyundai mega site yesterday.
We found out from Instagram that a worker had died. Pretty visceral photos of someone without a head.
Yeah, and just keep in mind, anytime when you work for a company, organization, whatever, whoever you're working for, when there's a death on the job, a lot of times they're not going to huddle you guys together and announce the death or the sickness. You're going to find out through social media. It's really sad, but a lot of companies directly do this. They're just not going to announce because it's nobody's business, right? They're not supposed to expose what happens to another, employee. It's no different than telling you that somebody else got fired. They're not supposed to tell you that. But information gets out there anyway.
Laying there in their vest.
Hyundai is the third largest automaker in the world with a valuation of $23 billion. Well,
yeah, it's just too bad they make shitty cars.
It manufactures some of the most popular electric cars and SUVs on the road today. The South Korean automaker has a dark side. You've gotten injured. Do you know other workers who've gotten injured since you started?
Yeah, all the time. From stuff like the carpal tunnel to spraying, people getting their leg caught on something.
John spoke to us anonymously for fear of retaliation from Hyundai.
The systems in place just aren't really well suited to safety.
But these aren't the issues that made national news. It was this.
Major immigration crackdown, hundreds of workers detained at a massive auto plant in Georgia.
Officials say roughly 450 undocumented migrants were apprehended.
Individuals from Guatemala, Colombia, Chile, Mexico, Ecuador, and Venezuela also were detained.
It happened from early in the morning, like right after shift started. That's when the Instagram reel started to pop up.
All years for Homeland Security, we have a search warrant for the whole site. We need all work to end on the site right now.
People fleeing, trying to get away, and just getting captured and kidnapped.
Many of those individuals that were detained through that operation in Georgia, they will face the consequences for that.
They were illegal aliens, and ICE was just doing its job.
ICE agents raided the 3,000-acre Hyundai campus, detaining some 475 workers, the largest immigration raid in U.S. history.
A lot of them had trust in the documents that they had, and unfortunately that wasn't the case. Everybody was taken regardless of their status.
She cute. All right, she a breath of fresh air. Swing her my way. I'm joking. So it's like, I want to know the psyche of the average ICE agent, because if you look back, within the last few weeks, I did 2 videos on 2 ICE agents. They're always getting caught with DUIs and shit. Like, what's the deal here? It's like they just employ anybody that's just Rambo.
But that story is just the tip of the iceberg. For years, Hyundai has been relying on a supply chain here in the South, made up of over 100 separate companies, spanning from Georgia to Alabama.
You see how these foreign companies put their facilities here in the States? It's like, I bet you the restrictions here are way more lighter than they are back home in South Korea.
With a dangerous track record of worker exploitation, including wage theft, child labor, and more, including the use of prisoners and immigrants to compete for low-wage jobs.
Listen, any large company is going to involve some corruption. Just remember that. No organization is 100% legit. There's always going to be some bullshit behind closed doors.
Looking at this list of suppliers, it just shows how complex and frankly convoluted the relationships are. How are we making sure, and how's Hyundai making sure that all of those companies are following the law? At the end of the day, Hyundai isn't taking responsibility for who works in their factories.
I traveled across Georgia and Alabama. I met with workers, their families, and advocates, former federal investigators, to get a close-up look at Hyundai's supply chain.
We build the Santa Fe, the Tucson, the Genesis. We build them, but we can't afford to buy them. The injuries that come behind building these cars, the disrespect.
I met Kissy Cox, who has worked on Hyundai's assembly line in Montgomery, Alabama for the last 3 years.
In those 3 years, I've had carpal tunnel surgery. I'm also having to have shoulder surgery on both of my shoulders. I had to get an MRI done where I found out that I had torn ligaments in my rotator cuffs on my right and left shoulder.
When you met with the doctor, what did he say to you?
I told him that I would be driving cars off like a speed bump track, and that since I was gonna have surgery, could he make that one of my modifications? He said that he's not sure that Hyundai would like that.
Cox says under Hyundai's policy, injured workers can only see Hyundai's approved doctors.
And Hyundai's doctor wouldn't approve you for a medical exemption.
Yes, sir.
Because he said the company wouldn't like that.
That Hyundai would not like that.
What you're describing is incredibly disturbing. You're looking at potentially criminal activity.
Yeah, I smell a lawsuit. They might not like it, but that's too bad. They could always get somebody else to do the job.
Could be medical mismanagement, which is a violation of OSHA.
We brought Kissy's case to Doug Parker, who served as Assistant Secretary of Labor for OSHA during the Biden administration.
I am extremely alarmed by the idea that a doctor who has a responsibility to care for a patient, that tells me that this is a captive system that isn't driven by medical need of workers, but driven by financial considerations of the company.
But Hyundai knows workers are afraid to speak out.
A lot of people need their job to continue living, but I feel like I need to be able to stand up and say what I got to say and not be afraid. At the end of the day, I really feel that God has me and I have a real purpose to not let what happens to me happen to any other team members. I've seen many injuries. I've come across people that are back at work. I see their arms swelled. I see their hands swelled. I see them, like on modified duty, but it doesn't matter when you're needed on the line.
What does it say to you about a company that treats workers like this?
Hyundai brags that they're a safe place to work, but they're definitely not.
But let's back up for a second. How did Hyundai Motor Group, the South Korean company that also makes Kia and Genesis cars, end up in Alabama and Georgia anyways? The auto industry was once concentrated in Michigan and Ohio.
Intricate electrical nerve centers, massive machines controlled by the push of a button that feed hungry machines on a split-second schedule.
But since the mid-1990s, it moved south, attracting companies like Hyundai with low wages, lack of regulation, state right-to-work laws.
The plot thickens. If you think about it, the poorest state in the country is Mississippi. And then right behind it is Alabama. There's a little bit more money, but not a lot. And then you have Georgia. All three states are next to each other. So that part of the country sees the less money, sees like a significant decrease in wage earnings. So that's where most of the poor population is. So that's where they're going to put all the slave type jobs at. Sorry to say that, but that's pretty much what it is. They're not going to let these places come to California. Oh, no. No, not even Nevada.
And a historical absence of labor activism, where unions don't pose as much of a threat. Plus, southern states offered huge tax incentives to attract Hyundai. The state of Georgia and local governments gave at least $2.1 billion in tax breaks and other incentives after the South Korean automaker and LG invested billions to build an electric car plant near Savannah, the same complex where John works, where 3 deaths have been reported. As they began construction, Hyundai brought in Korean nationals as technicians who could install equipment and train American workers.
It's a shortcut to save money, because Why waste time on a scavenger hunt searching for Americans that went to school for these degrees? Because a lot of people aren't getting degrees in this type of in blue collar work. A lot of people are going to school for white collar type work because nobody wants to do these, manual labor jobs. So what they could do is they could just go back to where they came from and bring people over here to America, and they'll work for less, because Americans will bitch about the wages not being enough versus the Koreans that come over here and just be happy that they have a job and they're here in America at the time being.
And when you heard about the ICE raid in Savannah, Georgia, what went through your mind that that's the federal agency that's showing up?
I was really amazed that it was the Koreans that were actually being detained and how mad the Korean government was about that. But I was wondering, did they actually know the workers at Hyundai were being treated just the same as those people that were being handcuffed that day?
The 1990 Hyundai Sonata. We're making more sense than ever.
Since 1993, Alabama has also provided huge incentives to automakers like Hyundai, offering some $300,000 in tax breaks for every job created. In South Korea, Hyundai has to deal with a strong, active labor union. But in the American South, accountability for their actions is much more limited.
We created a pro-business environment. We got everything you need, but mostly we've got a great workforce,
making it the perfect place to expand their operations.
Without a union, yes, we know. I mean, they're making some nice cars. The problem is they're easy to steal, like Hondas. So that's what makes them shitty cars. If a car is easy to steal, then pretty much the engineering's not too great, right?
We never wavered. The results of that unshakable commitment speak for themselves.
Hyundai is a glaring example of actually what's happening in a lot of companies in our country right now. They are so far removed that they think when they have this arm's length, not us, we didn't do it, how could we possibly know sort of approach, that they are more protected as a company.
The company directly employs some 5,600 workers between Montgomery, Alabama, and their Meta plant near Savannah, Georgia. But nearly 8,000 more people work throughout Hyundai's supply chain in these regions. And that's where things start to get really shady.
Alabama's Hyundai plant is in hot water.
The U.S. Department of Labor is suing Hyundai.
Evidence suggests underage workers as young as 12 worked at the plant.
One of the children who was working at this plant went missing. We were able to find the child, find the person's parents, and then they were able to talk to other people in the plant who said that there are dozens of children working at this parts manufacturing plant.
What?
Jessica Luman served as the administrator of the Wage and Hour Division at the U.S. Department of Labor during the Biden administration.
We found children as young as 13 who were working in part manufacturing companies. These children were making headlights, side mirrors, and they never should have been employed in those workplaces in the first place.
And kids aren't the only workers Hyundai exploits. They use prison labor too.
I worked beside a 16-year-old, God, for a year. They transferred me over, had me running the console line. And I had a girl right next to me, one was 16 years old. 16 years old, working for Hyundai.
And what was it like working for Hyundai while you were in prison?
A disaster. One of the worst experiences I've ever had in my life.
Mark Miller was one of at least a dozen Alabama State of Corrections inmates who worked at Juyang, a Hyundai supplier in Montgomery, up until last year. When he started out, he was making $10 an hour.
This is my check stub from Juyang, where I made parts for Hyundai and Kia.
Miller says he got injured on the job on more than one occasion.
But there was a steel rack that held parts. When I threw the box, I fell into that steel rail, tripping over them parts in the floor. When I did, it broke 4 of my ribs. Instead of taking me to the hospital, they sent me back to the prison with no medical.
This is where Mark Miller worked for 2 years while he was in prison here in Alabama. And while he knew he was working on Hyundai cars, the name on the door says Juyang.
Safety is a major issue. Workers like Mark report feeling overworked in the first place, will face situations where line speeds are incredibly fast. That's a dangerous condition.
Yeah, that's a lawsuit. They sent them back to prison. On top of that, they never diagnosed his medical condition. So that's some big money coming in right there. But I'm going to stop it right here. You guys can check out the rest of the video. I'm going to leave the link in the bottom in the description for those of you that are interested in watching it. Anyway, this is Kai LaVale. I'll catch you in the next video. Don't forget to subscribe. Goodbye.